Imagine coming home to your own mansion and discovering that the person sleeping beside you every night is a stranger wearing the face of someone you loved. Andrew Gate, billionaire tech visionary, the man who turned a college dorm room idea into an $8 billion empire, cuts his Tokyo investor trip short by 2 days. He's exhausted but excited. 3 weeks closing the biggest acquisition in his company's history deserves a celebration at home with the two people who matter most. The Tesla glides silently up the circular Malibu driveway. Andrew kills the engine, checks his reflection in the rearview mirror, and thinks about the 67-year-old man waiting inside. George Gate isn't his biological father, but he's the only father who ever counted. The retired Navy SEAL who pulled a scared 9-year-old out of foster care and gave him a life worth living. Andrew plans to surprise them both. Make George's favorite chili. Open that vintage bourbon they'd been saving. But when he steps through the side entrance leading to the kitchen, he hears voices that freeze him mid-step. Sharp, cold, venomous. His wife Tracy's voice cuts through the silence like a blade. I've told you repeatedly not to come upstairs when I have guests. What kind of impression do you think this gives? Andrew's blood turns to ice. Because the voice that answers is broken. Trembling. Afraid. George's voice. I'm sorry, Mrs. Tracy. I just wanted. I don't care what you wanted. You're nothing but a burden here. An embarrassment. Andrew stands frozen in the hallway, hidden behind the marble column, watching through the archway as his perfect life shatters into 1,000 pieces. George, the man who taught him honor, discipline, and strength, sits tied to a chair in the middle of their living room. His Navy SEAL jacket is wrinkled from struggle. His head hangs low, his breathing is labored, and standing over him, holding a champagne glass like it's just another accessory to her flawless aesthetic, is Tracy, his wife, the woman he trusted with everything. You're a relic, she says, swirling the champagne lazily. A mistake my husband refuses to correct. But don't worry, George. I'm going to fix that very soon. Andrew doesn't move, doesn't breathe. In that single moment, something fundamental shifts inside him. He stops being the trusting husband. He becomes the strategist, the protector, the son George raised him to be. This won't end the way Tracy expects. Not even close. For 3 hours, Andrew remained locked in his home office, hands trembling as he scrolled through weeks of security footage on his laptop. Each video revealed a new layer of calculated cruelty that made his stomach turn. Tracy forcing George to eat alone in the basement while she hosted dinner parties upstairs with friends who didn't even know the retired SEAL lived there. Tracy hiding George's medications and laughing when he asked where they'd gone. Tracy screaming at George for using the guest bathroom, forcing him to use the cramped, unheated storage room downstairs instead. But it was the footage from 11 days ago that completely destroyed him. George had prepared a small dinner to celebrate the 32nd anniversary of Andrew's adoption, the day that changed both their lives forever. Andrew had been stuck at a conference in Singapore, but he'd asked Tracy to make sure George felt special. Send flowers. Order his favorite meal. Make him feel celebrated. The video showed George waiting at the dining table, wearing his dress uniform, a homemade cake sitting in front of him with a single candle. His arthritic hands had clearly struggled with the frosting, but he'd done it anyway. Then Tracy walked in. She looked directly at the security camera, as if she knew Andrew would eventually watch, and smiled. How pathetic, she said. An old black man pretending he belongs in a billionaire's home. That's delusional even for you, George. She picked up the cake with both hands and dropped it into the trash. Then she blew out the candle, laughed, and walked away, leaving George sitting alone in the dark. When Andrew had called from Singapore that night asking if George enjoyed his surprise, Tracy had lied without hesitation. Oh my God, honey, he loved it. He actually cried. He said you're the best son any father could ever ask for. George had cried. Andrew could see it in the footage. But not from joy, from humiliation, from loneliness, from the soul-crushing realization that he was trapped in a home where he was hated. Andrew wiped his eyes and kept digging. He discovered a private WhatsApp group called Malibu Wives Upgrade Squad that Tracy had created with 5 other wealthy women. The messages inside made him nauseous. Tracy talking. Andrew's old military dad is getting more confused by the day. Yesterday, I caught him trying to use the upstairs bathroom again. Had to remind him where he actually belongs. Vanessa Sterling talking. At least you have patience, babe. I would have shipped him back to whatever ghetto he came from. Brittany Cole talking. Andrew needs to understand that charity has limits. Helping these people is one thing. Turning your house into a shelter for strays is another. But it was Tracy's response that made Andrew's hands curl into fists. Tracy talking, don't worry, girls. I'm documenting all his episodes. Forgetfulness, confusion, aggression. Once I have enough evidence of dementia, I'll convince Andrew he needs professional care. Sunny Meadows has a spot opening next month. Problem solved. Permanently. Andrew closed the laptop, heart pounding. Tracy wasn't just abusing George. She was orchestrating a plan to have him declared mentally incompetent and institutionalized against his will. That night, Andrew lay in bed pretending to sleep as Tracy returned from her evening spa session. Through half-closed eyes, he watched her check her phone, smiling with satisfaction as she read updates from her hate group. Andrew, she whispered, nudging him gently. We need to talk about your dad tomorrow. Some really concerning things have been happening while you were gone. He mumbled something incoherent, feigning exhaustion, while Tracy prepared for another Oscar-worthy performance. The next morning at breakfast, prepared by George, which Tracy only allowed when Andrew was home, the charade began. Honey, Tracy said, touching Andrew's arm with perfectly manicured nails. I don't want to alarm you, but George has been having some episodes lately. George froze mid-pour, coffee trembling in the pot. Yesterday, I found him trying to cook at 3 a.m, completely confused about what day it was, Tracy continued, her voice dripping with false concern. And he keeps leaving the stove on, doors unlocked. I'm worried he might hurt himself. Andrew watched George shrink with every lie. The man who had survived combat zones, who had raised him with discipline and love, was being dismantled piece by a woman who saw him as nothing more than an obstacle. Maybe it's time we look into professional care. Tracy said softly. Somewhere he'll be safe. Somewhere with people trained to handle his condition. Andrew set down his coffee cup, his mind flashing back to a memory from childhood. He'd been 12, coming home from school with a black eye after defending a younger kid from bullies. George had sat him down in their small kitchen, cleaned his wounds, and said something Andrew never forgot. Son, some people will try to make you feel small because they feel small inside. But you carry the strength of everyone who fought so you could be here. And one day, when you're big and strong, you'll protect others the way I protect you now. George had kept that promise. He'd worked double shifts to pay for Andrew's programming classes. He'd sold his truck to buy Andrew's first laptop. He'd stayed up nights helping with homework after 14-hour days. Now it was Andrew's turn. Interesting, Andrew said calmly, taking another sip of coffee. Where exactly would you recommend for this professional care? Tracy's eyes lit up, sensing victory. Well, Sunny Meadows is very well regarded. They specialize in cases like George's. Cases like George's, Andrew repeated slowly. And you've already researched this? I just want what's best for him, Tracy lied smoothly. And for us. We have our own lives to live, Andrew. Andrew nodded thoughtfully, watching George's head bow even lower. I'll think about it, he said. Tracy smiled, believing she'd won. What she didn't know was that Andrew had already begun dismantling her entire world. Because some people mistake kindness for weakness. And some people forget that the quiet ones are often the most dangerous when you threaten what they love. That afternoon, while Tracy attended her weekly Pilates class in Beverly Hills, Andrew drove downtown to meet someone his chief of security had discreetly recommended. Reggie Vaughn operated out of a modest office in a neighborhood far from Malibu's glittering social circles. exactly where Andrew needed to be. The former LAPD detective had a reputation for handling sensitive family cases with absolute discretion. When Andrew entered, he found a man in his late 50s with graying temples and the sharp eyes of someone who'd seen humanity at its worst. "Mr. Gate," Reggie stood, extending his hand. "Your security chief gave me the basics, but I need to hear it from you." Andrew opened his laptop and showed him everything. The months of security footage, the WhatsApp group, Tracy's falsified documentation of George's supposed mental decline, the forged medical reports she'd been creating to build her case for institutionalization. Reggie watched silently, his jaw tightening with each new piece of evidence. "This is systematic elder abuse," he said finally. "And what she's planning with those fake medical records, that's felony fraud. Possibly kidnapping if she succeeds in having him committed against his will." "I need more than home videos," Andrew said. "I need something ironclad, something that destroys her credibility completely before she can touch my father." Reggie leaned forward, connecting a device to Andrew's laptop. "Let's start with a complete forensic extraction of her devices. Phone, computer, tablet. If she's documenting lies about your father, she's leaving digital breadcrumbs of her real intentions everywhere." They would need physical access to Tracy's phone for at least 2 hours for a clean data pull. Andrew immediately thought of Friday's charity gala. Tracy always left her phone charging in the bedroom all night during those events, too busy networking to check it. "There's something else," Reggie continued, pulling up printouts of the WhatsApp messages. "This Malibu Wives upgrade squad, they're not just cheering Tracy on. Some of these messages suggest they're doing similar things to their own elderly family members. This could be a coordinated elder abuse network." Andrew's blood went cold. How many other Georges were out there, suffering in silence while their abusers sipped champagne? "If we get full access to the chat history," Reggie said, "we might have enough to expose a much larger pattern. Media would eat this alive. Malibu Elite runs elder abuse ring. That's front page material." As Andrew drove home, his phone rang. His personal attorney, Marcus Chun. "Andrew, I just got a very troubling call from a colleague," Marcus said without preamble. "Tracy's been consulting with a guardianship attorney. She's preparing to file a petition claiming George has advanced dementia and needs a court-appointed guardian." Andrew's hands tightened on the steering wheel. If Tracy obtained a guardianship order, she would have legal power to institutionalize George, control his finances, even restrict Andrew's access to him. "Marcus, I need you to file a counterpetition immediately and revoke any medical power of attorney Tracy might have in George's name." "Andrew, that'll tip her off that you know what she's planning." "I don't care. I'm not letting her legally kidnap my father while I build a case." That evening, Andrew found George alone in the garden, sitting on a weathered wooden bench, the only personal item he'd requested in the entire year he'd lived there. "Dad," Andrew sat beside him. "I need to ask you something, and I need the truth." George turned to him with eyes that had seen wars, loss, and now betrayal. "Of course, son. Tracy, has she been treating you well when I'm not around?" For a long moment, George said nothing. Andrew could see the internal battle between protecting his son from painful truth and trusting the man he'd raised to face injustice head-on. "She has her concerns," George finally said carefully. "Sometimes I think, maybe I should go back to my apartment. Maybe I'm too set in my ways for a place like this." "Dad, look at me." Andrew took his father's weathered hands. "You survived 3 tours. You raised me alone after Mom died. You turned a scared foster kid into someone who could build an empire. Don't let anyone make you feel like you don't belong in your own son's home." Tears glistened in George's eyes. "Sometimes I forget what a fighter you were as a boy, always standing up for the underdog, always facing down bullies twice your size." "I'm still that kid, Dad. And now it's my turn to fight for you." As they walked back inside, Andrew noticed Tracy watching from the upstairs window, phone pressed to her ear. She was clearly reporting something to someone, probably more manufactured evidence of George's confusion. Andrew smiled coldly. Let her keep digging her own grave. Every call, every text, every moment of calculated cruelty was being documented by someone who'd learned from childhood that patience wasn't weakness. It was strategy. And Tracy had made the fatal mistake of underestimating a son defending his father. The next morning, Reggie sent his first preliminary analysis. What they found was worse than Andrew had imagined. Tracy wasn't working alone. The WhatsApp group revealed a coordinated network of wealthy Malibu wives systematically abusing elderly relatives who'd become inconvenient to their perfect lives. Forged medical documents, fake dementia diagnoses, falsified incident reports. It was elder abuse as a social trend among the elite. Andrew saved everything to an encrypted drive that even Tracy didn't know existed. Every racist message, every humiliating photo, every cruel plan. As he watched Tracy rehearse yet another performance over breakfast, Andrew remembered something George had told him when he was 13, after some kids at school had mocked him for having a black father. Son, George had said, some people think strength means being the loudest or the meanest. But real strength is quiet. It watches, it prepares, it waits for the exact right moment. And when that moment comes, it doesn't just win. It teaches a lesson that echoes forever. Tracy was about to learn that lesson. And when it came, it would be as complete and devastating as the months of humiliation she'd inflicted on the man Andrew loved most. The Friday of the charity gala arrived with California sunshine and Tracy's excited energy filling the house. She floated through rooms in her silk robe, making final calls to caterers and photographers, completely unaware that this would be the last day of her perfect life. Andrew had spent the week executing his plan with surgical precision. While Tracy believed he was absorbed in acquisition meetings, he'd been orchestrating something far more important than any business deal. Step 1 had been the easiest. Dr. Elaine Brenner, one of the country's top geriatric neurologists, had quietly visited the house while Tracy was at her spa day. George underwent a complete cognitive assessment, memory tests, problem-solving exercises, neurological exams. The results came back crystal clear. George Gates' mind was as sharp as it had been in his Navy SEAL days. Zero signs of dementia, confusion, or cognitive decline. Mr. Gate, Dr. Brenner had told Andrew privately, your father's test scores are in the 94th percentile for his age group. Whoever's been documenting mental incompetence is either incompetent themselves or deliberately lying. Andrew had the medical report notarized, sealed, and added to his growing evidence file. Step 2 required more finesse. Reggie had made contact with staff members at Sunny Meadows, the facility where Tracy planned to dump George. What they discovered made Andrew's blood boil. Tracy had visited the facility 3 times in the past month, each time bringing falsified incident reports documenting George's supposed violent outbursts, wandering episodes, and inability to care for himself. She'd even brought photos, staged images of a messy room she claimed was George's, though Andrew recognized it as the unused storage room in the basement. The Sunny Meadows intake coordinator had been uncomfortable with the discrepancies, but hadn't questioned a wealthy woman with designer clothes and a billionaire husband, until Reggie showed up with credentials and started asking hard questions. Now they had statements, testimonies, documentation of Tracy's lies. Step 3 was the most satisfying. Reggie's forensic analysis of Tracy's phone revealed something beyond even elder abuse. She'd been siphoning money. Small amounts at first, $5,000 here, $10,000 there, transferred to accounts belonging to her friends in the Malibu Wives group. Described as household expenses or charitable donations in the records, but the forensic accounting told a different story. Tracy and her friends had created a rotation system. They'd use each other's homes for elaborate parties, then bill their husbands' accounts for inflated costs, pocketing the difference. Over 3 years, they'd collectively embezzled nearly $2 million from their unsuspecting spouses. Andrew had forwarded that information to Marcus Chun with a single instruction: prepare everything. I want her to have nothing. Now, as Tracy descended the stairs in her custom Versace gown, radiant with anticipated victory, Andrew felt nothing but cold calculation. "You look beautiful," he said, "because some performances required playing the role until the final curtain." "Thank you, darling." Tracy kissed his cheek, her perfume expensive and cloying. "Tonight's going to be perfect. I've arranged for the Sunny Meadows transport to pick up George on Monday morning. Dr. Harrison signed off on everything." "Dr. Harrison?" Andrew kept his voice neutral. "The psychiatrist I've been consulting. He agrees that George needs immediate residential care." Tracy checked her reflection one final time. "I know this is hard for you, but it's for the best. For everyone." Andrew nodded, watching her practice the concerned wife expression she'd perfected over months of lies. What Tracy didn't know, Dr. Harrison's signature had been forged. Reggie had already confirmed it with the doctor himself, who was now filing complaints with the medical board and cooperating with investigators. "I invited someone special tonight," Andrew said casually. "Hope you don't mind." Tracy's smile faltered slightly. "Who?" "Reggie Vaughn. Old friend of Dad's from his Navy days. Thought it would mean a lot to George to see a friendly face before." He let the sentence trail off meaningfully. "Oh." Tracy's discomfort was barely visible, but Andrew caught it. "That's thoughtful." She had no idea that Reggie would be arriving with a film crew disguised as event photographers, or that several journalists were already seated among the guests, waiting for a story that would define their careers. That evening, as they drove to the Malibu Beach Club in Andrew's Bentley, Tracy rattled off names of people who'd be there. Jennifer Walsh is bringing the state senator. Patricia Sterling is unveiling her new foundation tonight. And Vanessa Cole just closed on that beachfront property. She's going to be insufferable about it. The same women from the WhatsApp group. The same women who cheered on Tracy's cruelty. They had no idea they were driving into an ambush. The gala was everything. Tracy had planned crystal chandeliers, champagne towers, a string quartet playing by the ocean. 200 of Malibu's elite mingled in designer clothes, discussing yacht purchases and upcoming galas. Andrew spotted Reggie immediately, dressed in a sharp suit, looking every bit the successful businessman rather than the investigator he was. He gave Andrew an almost imperceptible nod. Everything was ready. Tracy worked the room like the social architect she was, kissing cheeks and dropping names. Andrew watched her laugh with Jennifer Walsh, embrace Patricia Sterling, whisper conspiratorially with Vanessa Cole. The same women who'd mocked George, who'd encouraged his abuse, who'd participated in a network of elder cruelty disguised as concern. At 8:30, the event coordinator announced that Tracy Pollingate would be giving the evening's keynote speech about her new charitable initiative, Caring for Our Elders with Dignity. The irony was almost too perfect. Tracy took the stage, beaming under the spotlight, completely unaware that this would be the last time Malibu's elite looked at her with admiration. "Thank you all for coming tonight," she began, her voice warm and practiced. "Tonight's cause is particularly close to my heart. As many of you know, my husband and I have been caring for his elderly father, and it's opened my eyes to the challenges of elder care." Andrew walked calmly to the stage. Tracy's smile flickered with confusion as he climbed the stairs. "Darling, what are you?" Andrew took the microphone. "Thank you, Tracy. But I think there's something everyone here needs to see." He nodded to Reggie. The screens behind the stage, meant to display Tracy's carefully curated charity photos, suddenly flickered to life with something entirely different. Security footage of Tracy screaming at George tied to a chair. Audio recordings of her calling him racial slurs. Screenshots of the Malibu Wives Upgrade Squad WhatsApp group. Every racist message displayed in high definition. The ballroom went silent. Tracy's face drained of all color as her own voice played through the speakers. "He's nothing but a burden. An embarrassment. I'm getting rid of him permanently." Andrew's voice was steady, emotionless, as he addressed the crowd. "My wife has spent the last year systematically abusing my 77-year-old father, a decorated Navy SEAL veteran, the man who raised me. She's been starving him, isolating him, tormenting him, and planning to have him falsely committed to an institution using forged medical documents. More images appeared. Tracy's falsified incident reports. Dr. Harrison's forged signature. Financial records showing embezzled funds. But she wasn't working alone. New screens lit up, showing messages from Jennifer Walsh, Patricia Sterling, Vanessa Cole, and 3 other women in the room, all describing similar abuse of their own elderly relatives. The gasps from the crowd were audible now. Andrew continued, relentless. What you're seeing is a coordinated elder abuse network operating among Malibu's elite. 6 women, using their wealth and status to torture and dispose of family members they deemed inconvenient, all while hosting charity galas about dignity and care. Tracy tried to speak, but no sound came out. Jennifer Walsh stood up, knocking over her champagne. "This is a private conversation. You can't." "It's evidence," Reggie said calmly from the back of the room, displaying his credentials. "And it's already been submitted to the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office, along with statements from staff, medical professionals, and witnesses." Patricia Sterling's husband turned to stare at his wife, recognition and horror crossing his face. Vanessa Cole was already moving toward the exit, but photographers blocked her path. Not the event photographer she'd expected, but journalists from the LA Times, TMZ, and the Washington Post. Andrew looked directly at Tracy, still frozen at the microphone. "You told me tonight was about caring for elders with dignity," he said quietly. "So let me show everyone what that actually looks like." The screens changed one final time. Video from earlier that day. George Gate, wearing his dress uniform, receiving the Congressional Gold Medal that Andrew had spent months arranging with his military connections. George, tears streaming down his face, being honored for his service by representatives from the Secretary of Defense's office. George, finally treated with the dignity he deserved. "My father is a hero," Andrew said, his voice carrying across the silent ballroom. "And I will spend every resource I have making sure the people who tried to destroy him face every consequence they've earned." He turned and walked off the stage. Behind him, Tracy collapsed to her knees as the cameras flashed and her entire world imploded in real time. The aftermath moved with the devastating efficiency of an avalanche. By midnight, every major news outlet had the story. Malibu elite wives run elder abuse ring dominated headlines from coast to coast. Video of Tracy's exposed lies at the charity gala went viral, racking up 50 million views in the first 12 hours. Andrew didn't go home that night. Instead, he sat with George in a suite at the Four Seasons, watching his father sleep peacefully for the first time in a year, no longer afraid, no longer listening for footsteps that might bring more humiliation. The next morning brought consequences faster than even Andrew had anticipated. Marcus Chun called at 7 a.m. The DA's office is filing charges against all 6 women. Elder abuse, fraud, embezzlement, forgery. Tracy's looking at 8 to 15 years if convicted. By 9 a.m., divorce papers had been served to Tracy at her mother's house in Santa Barbara, where she'd fled after the gala. The prenuptial agreement Andrew had secretly signed without her knowledge left her with exactly nothing. Every asset in her name had been leased or borrowed, every credit card connected to Andrew's accounts. By noon, Jennifer Walsh's husband had filed for divorce. Patricia Sterling's family had issued a public statement condemning her actions. Vanessa Cole had been removed from 4 charitable boards and banned from 3 country clubs. By evening, George's phone started ringing with calls from veterans organizations across the country wanting to honor him. The story of a Navy SEAL abused by the wealthy elite had struck a nerve. Here was a decorated hero treated like garbage by people who'd never sacrificed anything for anyone. Andrew watched his father field the calls with a mixture of embarrassment and quiet pride. "I'm not special," George kept saying. "I'm just a regular guy who did his job." "Dad," Andrew said gently, "you're literally wearing a Congressional Gold Medal. You're the opposite of regular." George smiled, the first genuine smile Andrew had seen from him in months. 3 weeks later, Tracy made her final attempt at contact. Tracy talking, Andrew, please. I made mistakes. Terrible mistakes. But we can fix this. Therapy. Counseling. Whatever you want. I'll change. I'll do anything. Please don't let our marriage end like this. Andrew stared at the message for a long moment. He thought about responding. About explaining that some betrayals can't be forgiven, that some bridges burned by cruelty should never be rebuilt. Instead, he simply blocked the number. Because Tracy didn't deserve an explanation. She deserved exactly what she'd given George: silence and erasure. 6 months later, the trials began. Andrew attended every hearing, sitting in the front row where Tracy and her co-conspirators could see him. George sat beside him, wearing his Navy uniform, a living reminder of who they'd tried to destroy. The testimonies were devastating. Staff members from Sunny Meadows described Tracy's aggressive attempts to institutionalize a healthy man. Medical experts dismantled her fabricated evidence. Financial analysts detailed the embezzlement scheme. Most damning of all, the WhatsApp messages, read aloud in court, each racist word echoing through the chamber. Tracy's lawyer tried to argue temporary insanity, claiming she'd been under stress from Andrew's demanding work schedule. The prosecution showed video of Tracy laughing as she destroyed George's anniversary cake. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Tracy received 12 years. Jennifer Walsh got 10. Patricia Sterling 9. The others received sentences ranging from 6 to 8 years. Andrew felt no satisfaction watching them led away in handcuffs. Only the cold certainty that justice, however delayed, had finally been served. 1 year after the gala, Andrew stood at the opening ceremony of the George Gate Veterans Community Center, a 40,000-square-foot facility in South Los Angeles offering housing, job training, counseling, and support for veterans transitioning back to civilian life. George stood beside him, overwhelmed as 200 veterans and their families applauded. "You didn't have to do this," George said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "Yes, I did," Andrew replied. "You spent your life serving people who needed you. It's time they had the chance to pay that forward." The center's mission statement was engraved on a bronze plaque by the entrance. Built in honor of George Gate, who taught one boy that family isn't defined by blood, but by who stands beside you when the world tells you to fall. May this place serve as a reminder that dignity, honor, and love will always defeat cruelty, prejudice, and hate. That evening, Andrew and George sat on the deck of Andrew's new house, smaller than the Malibu mansion, but warmer, filled with photos of their life together rather than designer furniture chosen for appearances. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't come home early that day?" George asked. Andrew thought about it. "Every day. I wonder how long you would have suffered before." He couldn't finish the sentence. "But you did come home," George said firmly. "And you did what I raised you to do. You protected someone who couldn't protect themselves. That's all any father wants, to know his son will stand for what's right." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set over the Pacific. Andrew's phone buzzed with a news alert. Tracy had been denied early parole. The parole board had cited her complete lack of remorse and ongoing refusal to acknowledge the severity of her actions. He deleted the notification without reading further. Tracy was a ghost now, a cautionary tale, a name that would forever be associated with the kind of casual cruelty that thrives in unchecked privilege. But George was here, alive, thriving, teaching coding classes to at-risk youth, mentoring young veterans, living with the dignity he'd always deserved but had been denied by someone too small-minded to see his worth. "You know what I learned from all this?" Andrew said. "What's that, son?" "That the best revenge isn't destroying someone who hurt you. It's proving that their hate was never strong enough to break what you built with love." George reached over and squeezed Andrew's shoulder, the same gesture he'd used when Andrew was 9 years old, scared and alone in foster care, unsure if anyone would ever want him. "You've always been the smartest person in any room," George said. "But now you're also the wisest. That's what makes me proudest." As stars appeared in the darkening sky, Andrew realized that Tracy's greatest miscalculation hadn't been underestimating his intelligence or resources. It had been assuming that a man who'd been saved by love could ever abandon the person who taught him what love meant. Some bonds aren't broken by cruelty. They're only made stronger. And in the end, that strength, quiet, patient, and absolute, is the only force that truly changes the world. Thank you for watching. Kindly help our growth by hitting the subscribe button. Thank you.